Hello, everyone, and welcome to the June public meeting of the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board. Steve Hamrick, IT specialist here at the agency. We would like to remind everybody, if they would like to ask a question, please feel free to drop them in the chat or email them to public@csb.gov. Also, if you would like to close captioning, there is a button in the top menu bar to enable that. And now I'd like to hand it off to our chairperson, Steve Owens. Steve?
Well, thank you, Steve, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Steve said, I'm Steve Owens. I'm the chairperson of the Chemical Safety Board, and welcome to this public meeting. The CSB continues to be one of the most efficient and productive agencies in the federal government, and we've been very busy since our last public meeting back in March. Just last month, on May 27th, we issued the final report for the CSB's investigation into the fatal November 2024 explosion at the Givaudan Sainte-Claire facility in Louisville, Kentucky. The explosion occurred when a large reactor that was producing caramel coloring for a food product violently ruptured. The explosion killed 2 employees and seriously injured several others. It also caused millions of dollars in damage to the facility and to nearby homes and businesses. In addition to the Givaudan report, the CSB also recently initiated 2 new investigations. On May 27th, the CSB opened an investigation into the fatal incident that occurred on May 26th at the Nippon Dynawave paper facility in Longview, Washington. A large tank at the facility ruptured and released hundreds of thousands of gallons of white liquor, a highly corrosive chemical used in paper and pulp manufacturing. 11 workers died and several others were seriously injured. Additionally, whoops, my computer's messing up. Sorry, folks. Additionally, on April 23, the CSB opened an investigation into the fatal chemical release that occurred on April 22nd at the Catalyst Refiners facility in West Virginia. 2 workers died and dozens of others were injured in the incident. Including the Nippon Dynawave and Catalyst Refiners investigations, the CSB now has 9 ongoing investigations. These investigations collectively involve 36 fatalities, dozens of serious injuries, and hundreds of millions of dollars in property damage. And while we have 9 current investigations, the incidents resulting in the 36 fatalities that have occurred in just the last 10.5 months in our 6 most recent investigations. Altogether, the 36 deaths are the largest number of fatalities ever investigated by the CSB during a comparable time period. This heartbreaking string of fatal incidents started last summer, on July 29, with the explosion and fires at the Horizon Biofuels facility in Fremont, Nebraska. The incident resulted in the deaths of 3 people, an operator and his 2 young daughters, ages 8 and 12. This was followed by the explosion at the U.S. Steel Coke Works facility in Clairton, Pennsylvania, that occurred on August 11 and killed 2 employees. And then there was the horrific explosion on October 10th at the Accurate Energetic Systems facility in McEwen, Tennessee. That incident killed 16 people. On January 27th of this year, a release of highly toxic hydrogen sulfide at the Woodland Pulp facility, Baileyville, Maine, resulted in the death of 2 young employees who were both just in their 20s. And as I noted, on April 22nd, 2 workers died at the Catalyst Refiners facility in West Virginia. And on May 26th, 11 workers were killed at the Nippon Dynawave facility in Washington. During this meeting, you'll hear presentations on the Givaudan report and our investigations into the Catalyst Refiners and Nippon Dynawave incidents. You'll also hear about other activities of the CSB, including information from our accidental release reporting rule and about several of our recommendations. And before I turn the floor over to my fellow board member, Sylvia Johnson, for her remarks, I want to remind everybody that, as Steve Hamrick said, at the end of today's presentations, we'll provide an opportunity for public comments. In the interest of time, we ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes, and please use the Teams icon on your screen to raise your hand so that you can be recognized to speak. If you'd prefer to submit written comments, you can send them to public@csb.gov. And as Steve said, if you wish to ask a question, please submit that to public@csb.gov and we'll get back to you in an appropriate time. Now I'd like to turn this over to Sylvia Johnson for her remarks, and thank you all again for being here. Sylvia?
Thank you, Steve, and thank you everyone for being here today. As Steve said, since our last public meeting, the work of this agency has certainly continued with focus and purpose. As the chairperson noted, we've released a final investigative report. We've advanced recommendation status changes and opened 2 new investigations. Investigations alone don't improve safety. But what does improve safety is people, workers who speak up, leaders who act early, industries willing to learn from past failures instead of repeating them. That is why stakeholder engagement remains central to the mission of this agency. Excuse me, preventing disasters requires more than recommendations, it requires partnership. And progress happens when government, workers, and industry all sit at the same table before tragedy strikes. In this vein, since our last meeting, Executive Director of Investigations and Recommendations, Steve Kleist, and I attended a meeting of the American Fuel and Petroleum Manufacturers Process Safety Work Group. During that meeting, we provided updates on the agency's current investigations, staffing levels, and accidental release reporting rule data. We also discussed lessons learned from the Dow, Louisiana Operations Glycol 2 plant investigation in Plaquemine, Louisiana, as well as the Pemex refinery investigation in Deer Park, Texas. Those discussions matter because safety lessons only create value when they're shared and applied. In April, I joined Executive Director Kleist and Acting General Counsel Stephen Messer and Senior Chemical Investigator its chemical incident investigator, Dan Talima, at the Baker Hot Settlers Crisis Management Client Seminar. We discussed agency priorities, recent investigations, corporate governance, near-miss events, post-incident response, and managing parallel litigation. One message remained clear throughout those discussions. Strong safety systems protect both workers and businesses. Also, since our last meeting, the board, Executive Director Kleist, and Tyler Nelson participated in the American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers and American Petroleum Institute's Process Safety Advisory Group meeting, where Tyler presented on the Pemex investigation. Last month, the board also participated in a panel discussion at the United Steelworkers Safety, Health, and Environment Conference. That engagement reflected something important, and that is worker safety is not just the responsibility of workers or companies, it's both. Every worker, regardless of industry, deserves to return home safely at the end of the day. During the conference, we discussed recent recommendations, recurring safety themes identified across investigations, and the ongoing collaboration between the CSB and the United Steelworkers during investigations. Several CSB investigators also led workshops focused on completed and ongoing investigations and shared practical lessons directly with workers and safety professionals. These engagements reinforce a simple truth. Chemical safety can't succeed in isolation. It requires transparency and accountability as well as leadership. Today's meeting reminds us what's at stake when culture breaks down. Chemical incidents are preventable with strong systems, proper training, hazardous awareness, and leadership that values long-term safety over short-term pressures. The CSB exists to drive change before the next alarm sounds. Progress doesn't happen by chance. Every report we publish carries weight and every recommendation carries purpose. But before I turn the floor back to Chairperson Owens, I'd be remiss in not acknowledging the sober reality that just since our last public board meeting, the CSB has launched 2 additional investigations that involve 13 workplace fatalities. The April 22nd event at Catalyst Refiners facility in Nitro, West Virginia, where 2 people died and 5 others were injured. And just over a month later, 11 workers died in a chemical tank implosion at the Nippon Dynaway paper mill in Longview, Washington. 13 workers, 13 families, 13 futures forever changed. These are not just incidents on an investigation docket. These are human beings who went to work expecting to return home. They were fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, friends, coworkers, and neighbors. Their loss reminds us of why our work matters. It reminds us that every recommendation we issue, every lesson we share, and every safety improvement adopted by industry has the potential to save lives. The work of the CSB is about learning from tragedy, but our ultimate goal is to prevent tragedy from occurring in the first place. The safest incident is the one that never happens. That responsibility belongs to all of us. Thank you, and back to you, Steve.
Well, thank you, Sylvia. Now we'll begin the formal presentations at our meeting today. I'll turn the floor over to our Executive Director of Investigations and Recommendations, Steve Kleinston. He'll introduce members of his team for the various presentations that I mentioned in my opening remarks. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson Owens. We have a total of 5 presentations today that highlight the work performed by the agency's Office of Investigations and Recommendations since our last business meeting. The first presentation will provide the viewers with an overview of the key facts of the Givaudan investigation, as mentioned by both board members in their introductory remarks. The investigation was completed, and I'll turn the presentation over to our team comprised of Grace Angles, Nathan Bremer, and Elle Snyder. So, team, please proceed.
If you could move to the next slide, please, Steve. And the next one, please. The Givaudan facility, located in Louisville, Kentucky, produced various classes of liquid and powdered caramel colorings for use primarily in the food and beverage industries. D.D. Williamson originally began operations at the Louisville facility in 1948. In 2021, D.D. Williamson was acquired by the Givaudan Flavors Corporation. The Louisville facility was previously the subject of a CSB investigation in 2003 when a vessel explosion resulted in 1 worker fatality. As you can see in the map here, the facility was situated adjacent to an active rail line consisting of production, office, and warehouse space, and was located in close proximity to residential properties and other businesses. The closest residential property was located less than 100 feet from the facility. Next slide, please. On November 12, 2024, Reactor 6, which was being used to produce a caramel food coloring product, exploded when the sugar ingredient experienced an uncontrolled decomposition reaction that produced heat and large volumes of non-condensable gases. The uncontrolled reaction was initiated when a vent valve used to control the pressure inside the reactor failed in the closed position. Reactor 6 was equipped with an emergency pressure relief system consisting of a rupture disc and a pressure relief valve installed in series. The installed relief system was undersized for the uncontrolled decomposition reaction of the sugar ingredient and was unable to adequately relieve the pressure generated by the gases. Next slide, please. Presented on the left of this slide is a depiction of Reactor 6 highlighting the vent equipment that contributed to this incident. Additionally, on the right-hand side of the slide are graphical results from laboratory calorimetry testing of the caramel coloring recipe being produced on the day of the incident. The results show a major exothermic reaction that generates significant heat and pressure. The initiation temperature of this exothermic reaction, when in a closed reaction vessel, was measured to be 243 degrees Fahrenheit. Notably, that temperature is below the target set point temperature used for the caramel coloring process. I will now hand over the presentation to Investigator Elle Snyder, who will present the incident consequences and safety issues.
Thank you, Nathan. The explosion fatally injured 2 employees and seriously injured 3 other employees. The explosion resulted in approximately $30 million in damage to the facility and approximately $10 million in damage to nearby homes and businesses. Givaudan has since demolished the Louisville facility. Next slide, please. The CSB identified 5 safety issues from the Givaudan incident. The first safety issue the CSB identified in this incident was understanding chemical reaction hazards. The CSB found that Givaudan and D.D. Williamson did not understand the chemical reaction of the sugar decomposition hazard. Givaudan did not equip the reactor with a properly sized relief device for those decomposition hazards. There was a lack of industry guidance in managing the hazards of the sugar decomposition reaction, and there was a lack of information included on the safety data sheets to warn of the decomposition potential of the sugar ingredient. The CSB issued many recommendations from this safety issue to multiple parties. The CSB recommends that Givaudan hire a third-party consultant to complete chemical testing and analysis of all types of caramel coloring products they produce. That Givaudan hire a third-party consultant to design adequate emergency pressure relief systems for their reactors, and that Givaudan maintain this data and analysis from these activities for use in process hazard analyses. The CSB recommends that the International Technical Caramel Association, a trade group for caramel coloring, publish a technical guidance document detailing the safe practices for manufacturing caramel coloring. And to sugar manufacturers and industry groups, the CSB recommends that they update safety data sheets to include decomposition temperature and the consequences of exceeding that temperature. The CSB also recommends that the industry groups alert their members of this hazardous reaction and this incident that took place at Givaudan. Next slide, please. The second safety issue that the CSB identified was commitment to managing process safety. D.D. Williamson and subsequently Givaudan had created the framework for a process safety policy at the Louisville facility, but they did not follow through on implementing this policy. There was no process safety policy owner to ensure the policy was implemented. And ultimately, a poor process safety system at the Louisville facility led to a loss of institutional knowledge about the caramel coloring reaction hazards, a lack of hazard analyses, and ultimately an unsafe reactor design. The CSB issued recommendations to Givaudan to hire a third-party consultant to 1, conduct a hazard analysis of the new facility if they build one, and then implement the recommendations issued by the third party. And 2, to develop a process safety management system for the new facility if one is built. Additionally, the CSB recommends that Givaudan designate an employee to own the process safety policy and fill a senior leadership position that is responsible for overseeing process safety at all of Givaudan's caramel coloring facilities. I will now hand it over to Investigator Grace Engels to discuss the other 3 safety issues identified by the CSB.
Thank you, Elle. The third safety issue that was identified was related to the safe operating limits of the vessel. So safe operating limits are the minimum and maximum conditions under which equipment or processes can safely operate. Once this limit is met and exceeded, all troubleshooting should cease. On the day of the incident, the vessel exceeded its safe operating limits for both temperature and pressure. Per the established procedures, personnel were supposed to issue an evacuation. However, there were no alarms or other indications to alert the operators that the safe operating limits were exceeded and that they needed to issue that evacuation. The CSB concluded that employees were not adequately trained on the value of, the purpose of, or the response to exceeding that safe operating limit. So as a result, the CSB is recommending that Givaudan 1, establish a corporate level policy to address the training and retraining of personnel on those safe operating limits and the required response actions. And 2, to establish some sort of automated alert to notify operator that that not to exceed value was exceeded. Next slide, please. And then the fourth safety issue that was identified was facility siting. The purpose of a facility siting evaluation or analysis is to see what could be impacted by fire, explosion, or toxic hazards, determine that worst case scenario, and then ensure you are not placing people or equipment in a vulnerable location. Both of the fatally injured employees were in the control room at the time of the incident. The control room was approximately 40 feet from reactor 6, which was within the blast zone. And when it was constructed, there was no facility siting analysis done, and it was not constructed to be blast resistant. So as a result, the CSB is issuing a recommendation to Givaudan to hire a third party to conduct a facility siting study prior to construction of any new caramel coloring facility. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, there it is. The fifth and final safety issue that the CSB identified was the regulatory coverage of reactive hazards. So at the time of the incident, the facility was not regulated by OSHA PSM or EPA RMP process safety regulations. And as a result, they were not required to implement safety management systems such as process hazard analysis, management of change, and compilation of process safety information. Improved safety management systems could have provided an opportunity for decision makers involved in the reactor 6 design to understand the decomposition scenario and to install an adequate relief system for the reaction. So the CSB is reiterating a rec for OSHA and EPA to broaden the coverage of PSM and RMP respectively to achieve a more comprehensive control of reactive hazards. So that is our final safety issue identified for the Givaudan investigation. Thank you for your time. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Executive Director Kleist.
Well, thank you, Grace. And again, I'd like to thank the team that was involved in this investigation. The investigator in charge, who is not able to be with us today, Lauren Grimm, served as the investigator in charge, and in the team of Grace Angles, Reamer, and Elle Snyder. I would also like to thank two other investigators, the initial deployment, and those two individuals would be Cruz Redmond and Hartz that helped make this efficient investigation from the very start. So thank you all for your contribution to an excellent report. This investigation underscores the importance of chemical manufacturers to fully understand and address reactive hazards and safe operating limits associated with their operations. Companies should also address the location of their control rooms and related facilities near the operating equipment to reduce the likelihood of injuries in an event of loss of containment events similar to what we experienced here at the Givaudan investigation. So a lot of good learning hopefully will take place from the results of this investigation. Our next two presentations will focus on our two most recent deployments. The first being the Catalyst Refiners deployment, the incident that took place in the state of West Virginia. The presenter will be Chemical Incident Investigator Butch Griffin. So Butch, please proceed.
Thank you, Executive Director Kleist. On behalf of the Catalyst Refiners team, which presently consists of investigators Elle Snyder and Marianne Bogutsky, I will be providing an update on the CSB's investigation of the incident that occurred at Catalyst Refiners. Next slide, please. On April 22nd, 2026, at approximately 9:30 a.m., a release of hydrogen sulfide as a result of a chemical reaction occurred at the Catalyst Refiners facility in Institute, West Virginia. The facility was used to refine silver from spent ethylene oxide catalyst and to manufacture silver oxide. At the time of the incident, Catalyst Refiners was in the process of decommissioning the site. As a result of the hydrogen sulfide release, 2 Catalyst Refiners employees were fatally injured and 4 other employees were seriously injured. Other employees and emergency responders were decontaminated and evaluated or treated at local medical facilities. In response to the release, local officials issued a shelter-in-place order that extended out to a radius of 1 mile from the site. Next slide, please. Following the release, several local agencies immediately responded, including the Kanawha County Emergency Ambulance Association, the Institute Fire Department, and the Nitro Fire Department. Both the Charleston Fire Department hazmat team and the EPA conducted post-incident air monitoring and confirmed the presence of hydrogen sulfide at the site. The West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection also responded to the site. Presently, the CSB's investigation is ongoing, and we are continuing to gather information through employee interviews and analysis of collected chemical samples, which we will assess to identify the cause or probable cause of the release. This concludes our update of the Catalyst Refiners investigation, and now I'll turn it back over to Executive Director Kleist.
Thank you, Butch. And in addition to the members of the current team that Butch described, I'd also like to recognize Elle Snyder and Bill Steiner that provided initial on-scene support in the investigation. So thank you for the entire team for your work. The second deployment that we're going to discuss this afternoon is the Nippon Dynawave accidental release event that took place in the state of Washington. Mark Wingard will be doing the presentation. Mark is a a supervisory chemical incident investigator, and he will do the presentation this afternoon. So Mark, please proceed.
All right. Thank you, Executive Director Kleist. Like Executive Director Kleist said, I'm Mark Wingard. I'm the investigator in charge for the Nippon Dynawave investigation. Next slide, please. On May 26, 2026, around 7:08 a.m., a tank filled with about 900,000 gallons of a material called white liquor catastrophically failed, releasing a wave of this caustic liquid that knocked down walls and filled a large portion of the facility. The incident resulted in 11 workers being fatally injured, as well as 3 serious injuries. The caustic material reached the Columbia River, as well as a ditch which served the nearby Longview community. The CSB deployed a team on the day of the incident and has been on site since, conducting interviews, performing document analysis, and working to get the site to a place where we can conduct our investigation. Next slide, please. The Longview facility is a pulp mill where their primary purpose is to take wood chips in, react it, create pulp, which can then be used to make paper products. The incident occurred when a white liquor tank, which is used in this process, failed. The white liquor is a caustic material that has a very high pH and is damaging when it comes in contact with skin, eyes, or any part of the human body. It is used to digest wood and separate the lignin from the cellulose. The lignin is then used in a piece of equipment referred to as a boiler, where it is burned off to produce energy. The liquor goes in a loop, as can be seen here, within this process, which is referred to in the paper industry as the craft process. At multiple points in this cycle, there are large storage tanks which hold the liquor for use within the pieces of equipment that make the cycle work. The white liquor tank that failed was immediately upstream of the digester, which is where the reaction occurs to separate the cellulose from the lignin. Next slide, please. The CSB's investigation is ongoing. We're continuing to find facts and determine analysis to find where our report will go. We're currently looking into a number of different areas, including the mechanisms that led to tank failure, facility siting of the tank, maintenance and mechanical integrity of all the storage tanks at the facility, and any relevant facility, corporate, and industry standards that could be applicable. Our investigation is ongoing, and we'll have more findings, analysis, and recommendations in our final investigation report and subsequent products. I'll now turn it back to Executive Director Kleist.
Thank you, Mark. And again, wish to recognize the members of the deployment team. In addition to Supervisory Chemical Investigator Mark Wingard, Chemical Incident Investigators Melike Yersis, Owen Tripany and Zach Reagan provided on-scene support to this very important deployment event that we experienced and just discussed here. We can have the next slide, please. Okay, I will be covering the accidental release event update. The accidental release reporting program manager Dan Talima is not able to be with us, but I do want to thank him for his diligence in maintaining this program, which provides the industry with valuable information on the result of these incidents that we investigate, along with providing data for the industry as a whole so they can better understand the number of events that take place and their consequences. This data is effective through the end of May of this year. There have been a total of 651 reportable events, a reportable event being an event that results in an accidental release that involves a serious injury or a example of property damage in excess of $1 million. These events resulted in a total of 103 fatalities with 355 serious injuries and 314 with substantial property damage. And as you can see from the graph, and it's towards the right-hand side of the screen, during the period of the November-December timeframe of 2025, there was an increase that it was experienced that averaged these are third-month moving average data points here, but an average of 15 incidents reported in a given month. In the January of 2026 to February 2026 timeframe, that number decreased to approximately 8, which is getting back towards a more normalized rate of reporting. But we did see in the April timeframe an increase to the point where we were experiencing approximately 13 incidents reported to us in the month. In May, we started to see a downward movement in that number. We certainly hope that that continues throughout the course of time. But again, this is data is very important for companies to recognize that these events are still occurring and the efforts necessary to ensure a safe and secure operation for their organizations to minimize injury and property damage to both the facility as well as the surrounding community. If we can have the next slide, please. The next presentation will be made by Director of Recommendations, Chuck Barbie, and he will highlight some of the accomplishments in the Office of Recommendations. So Chuck, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Executive Director Kleist. Next slide, please. Ooh, wrong way. There we go. Highlighted recommendations we're going to talk about today are Didion R2 and R7 to Didion, ITC R6 to API, OptimaBell R15 to CCPS, and then we're going to talk a little bit about CCPS after that. Next slide, please. Okay, the Didion Milling Company explosion and fire. On May 31st, 2017, explosions and fire occurred at the Didion Milling Inc. facility in Cambria, Wisconsin. 5 employees of Didion were fatally injured as a result of the incident, and 14 employees were injured. The incident resulted in an estimated property damage of $15 million. We issued several recommendations, 9 of which were to Didion, and we're going to talk about R2 and R7. R2, we asked Didion to develop and implement modifications to the pneumatic conveying and dust collector ductwork system in accordance with various NFPA standards. At a minimum, we wanted to ensure minimum required transport velocity is maintained throughout the system, and we wanted them to implement periodic inspections and testing for the system. With regard to R7, we wanted them to update the facility emergency response plan and train all their employees on that updated plan. Specifically, we wanted a signal and alarm system. We wanted emergency shutdown procedures, instructions for when and how to trigger emergency evacuations, instructions for when to notify emergency responders for a need of assistance, as well as the response to potential fire scenarios such as smoldering fires inside equipment. Next slide, please. Now, Didion did all those things that we asked for both R2 and R7. However, that is not why we're highlighting Didion today. On September 1st of 2025, all 9 of the recommendations were in an open, unacceptable response or no response received status. Based on a tremendous amount of communication between the CSB and Didion, just 1 week later, all 9 of those recommendations completely changed and became an open, acceptable response or alternate response status. So that means they're progressing towards implementation. And as of today, 7 of their 9 recommendations are acceptably closed. So there's only 2 more to go. So what we wanted to say to Didion is, keep up the good work. Let's get those last 2 closed. We're almost there. We're almost at the finish line. So again, these were proposed to the board to be closed acceptable action. The board agreed to that, and they set that status as closed acceptable action. And again, 7 of the 9 recs are acceptably closed. Good job, Didion. Next slide, please. The next incident we're going to talk about is the Intercontinental Terminals Company, or ITC, tank fire. This occurred on March 17th, 2019. They had a loss of containment and fire that occurred at the ITC terminal facility in Deer Park, Texas. The incident resulted from a pump seal failure, and the fire burned for 3 days and spread from that initial tank 80-8, to another 14 tanks located within the same containment area. All 15 tanks were completely destroyed. On March 22nd, 2019, the containment area wall partially collapsed, releasing approximately 21 million gallons of a mixture of petroleum products, firefighting foam, and water into the Tucker Bayou and adjacent waterways, including the Houston shipping channel. So we issued several recommendations as a result of that, and one of those was to the American Petroleum Institute, or API. We asked them to update their standard 2610, which is the design, construction, operation, maintenance, and inspection of terminal and tank facilities. And we wanted them to include flammable gas detection systems and address both engineering and administrative controls, including actions associated with responding to a catastrophic or emergency leak. Next slide, please. They published the 4th edition of the standard in March of 2026, and they included everything we asked them. But additionally, they made substantial improvements to the safety management section. In particular, they updated 6.1, the general section, 6.3, operating procedures, 6.6, management of change, 6.8, pre-startup safety review. And in addition to that, they added additional sections, whole sections, operational safety info, compliance audits, employee participation, and trade secrets. Now, one of the reasons this is such, we're making such a big deal out of this is we have outstanding recommendations open to EPA and OSHA, which are regulatory in nature, and therefore they take a long time. But we asked them basically to expand PSM and RMP to include facilities like ITC. During the course of the investigation, it was determined that those might not apply to them. However, what they did is they took that information and they put it in their standard. So, though not a regulation, again, it's broad reaching, and it does impact those particular kinds of facilities, and it does give them a way to apply PSM. And for that, we recommended the board that they close the recommendation as exceeded recommended action, which in the Office of Recommendations and at the CSB, that is the gold standard. And the board agreed, and so therefore it was. Closed exceeds recommended action. So for API, outstanding. Next slide, please. And the last recommendation we're going to talk about is from the Optimum Bell explosion and fire. On December 8th, 2020, a metal rotary cone double dryer exploded following a decomposition reaction that resulted in a fire and toxic chlorine release at the Optima Bell facility in Bell, West Virginia. The explosion occurred while Optima Bell, a toll manufacturer, was dehydrating a product on behalf of Clearon Corporation through a contractual agreement. One Optima Bell employee was fatally injured in the explosion, 2 others were evaluated for respiratory irritation, and 1 member of the public reported a minor leg injury. Debris from the explosion was found almost half a mile from the incident, and local authorities issued a shelter-in-place order for a 2-mile radius for over 4 hours. The facility experienced an estimated $33.1 million in property damage. We issued several recommendations as a result of this incident, one of which was to the Center for Chemical Process Safety, or CCPS. We asked them to update guidelines for process safety in outsourced manufacturing operations. We wanted them to include current best practices, introduce guidance specifics to tolling brokers or project managing companies, and cross-reference and align with the comprehensive management systems framework and terminology contained in their guidelines for risk-based process safety. Next slide, please. And CCPS, they went all out. They absolutely did that. They executed a complete rewrite of the guidelines for process safety and outsourced manufacturing, and that second edition was published in March of 2026. They also, on their own, decided they were going to issue a monograph called Process Safety and Outsourced Manufacturing Operations. And the reason that is significant is because, you know, the guideline book, that's going to cost you a little bit of money. The monographs, those are on their site free of charge, and it's a high-level summary of the book. So once you read the monograph, if you find that it applies to you, that then directs you to buy the book. But if nothing else, you get a much broader reach to a large audience. So for that, we recommended to the board that they close this recommendations exceed recommended action as well, and that's fantastic. And so in a previous presentation, as a matter of fact, I think it was last June, I talked about our recommendation recipients and the way we have collaborated and worked with them. Next slide, please. This time, we didn't mention them last time, but this time I want to mention CCPS. The last time we did this, I think API, they had at the time 56 recommendations that had been issued to them. NFPA had 22. Had we included CCPS on that list, which was SDOs, which is why they weren't included, they would be third. They're the third highest recommendation recipient in receiving recommendations from the CSB that started back at Union Carbide, which was the third investigation that we deployed on. So in the 24 years, we have issued them 11 recs, and all of them are acceptably closed. 3 are closed with exceeds recommended action. And that's pretty significant when you think about it. I'll tell you why. So I always like to tell people we've issued 1,047 total recommendations. That's our number right now. 924 of those are closed. Of those 924, only 26 are closed exceeds recommended action. And CCPS has claimed 3 of them. 2 from the reactive hazards safety study and one from Optima Bell. And CCPS right now is holding the record for the highest amount of closed exceeds recommended action. So for our other recommendation recipients, if that's a motivating factor, consider yourself motivated. And with that, all news, good news coming out of the Office of Recommendations today. I will pass it back to Executive Director Kleist. Thanks again for the opportunity to present.
Well, thank you, Chuck, for that briefing, and also appreciate the recommendation recipients that we discussed today that were able to exceed the recommended action called for in the recommendations themselves. These are very important tools that the CSB has with regard to improving process safety in the industry. And it's very reassuring to know that the recipients in several cases have gone above and beyond the ask that was made within the recommendation and have earned the rating classification of exceeds recommended action. So thank you, in this case, the CCPS for sure. Before I turn the presentation back over to Chairperson Owens, I would like to recognize other groups within the organization that make the work that we do happen so seamlessly. This afternoon focused on the work of the Office of Investigations and Recommendations, and we would not be able to do the work that we do without the support of our other groups within the organization. So I do want to take a moment now to recognize Sabrina Morris, the Director of the Office of Administration, Hillary Cohen, the Director of External Affairs, and Stephen Messer, who is leading the Office of General Counsel, all of which are vital functions within our organizations and often do not get the recognition, certainly, that the Investigation and Recommendation Office receives during these meetings. But thank you to you and your team members that help us do the work that we do and accomplish the objectives that we do accomplish. So thank you very much for your support. Mr. Chairman, Chairperson, I'll turn the presentation back over to you.
Well, thank you, Steve, and thanks to the members of your team for those terrific presentations. I also want to echo your comments there about the great work that other offices within the CSB have done, not just in support of investigations, but the other activities that we have ongoing here at the CSB. We couldn't conduct the investigations that we do. We couldn't issue the recommendations that we do. We couldn't collect the information that we do under the accidental release reporting rule and a whole host of other things that are part of the daily job of this agency without the work of everybody in the agency working together as one team. So we really appreciate all the hard work of all of our career professional staff here at the agency. I'd just like to make one comment before we open it up for comments from the public, which is about the accidental release data that you discussed, Steve. We often get questions, comments about that. And one question in particular always comes up, which is when you see the numbers that were at the bottom of the slide, for example, it'll say X number of fatalities at the list of it, or X number of facilities with fatalities. That data doesn't show the actual real numbers in terms of the fatalities or the serious personal injuries that occur or occur in connection with many of these investigations, because as both Sylvia Johnson and I noted in our comments, a number of these incidents that take place have multiple fatalities or have multiple serious injuries at them. And so while there might have been, I believe it was 103 incidents that had fatalities associated with them, there are more fatalities than that, just based on what we've already discussed just at this meeting. And also just a comment on another question we get is what exactly is considered a serious injury by the CSB. There's the data that was reported there is based on what's in the actual accidental release reporting rule in terms of the reporting criteria. and there are certain threshold levels. And the one for serious personal injury, which was defined when the rule was promulgated 6 years ago, back in 2020, is that there has to be a formal hospital admission for it to be reportable to the CSB and for it to be considered a serious injury for purposes of reporting, not necessarily for purposes of what we do here at the agency, because in our view, anytime anyone is injured at a facility, we take that seriously, but for reporting purposes to us, if an individual is injured, they go to the hospital, they're treated, they're released without being formally admitted, then that incident doesn't become reportable to us. So, we may not have that on our list if there's an incident that has occurred in a community where there wasn't a fatality. People might have been injured but not admitted to the hospital. And in terms of the property damage limits, as Steve indicated, the rule, as it was promulgated 6 years ago, sets a floor of $1 million. So it has to be a million or above to be reportable to us in terms of the amount of property damage. So there can be incidents out there where there is damage to businesses, homes, facilities that doesn't get reported to us because it doesn't reach $1 million in damage. And so I just wanted to put that out there just in case somebody's got that question or has a comment on it, because we do get that question a lot just in the ordinary course of business here at the agency. And so, and we have investigated incidents over the years that haven't necessarily met the thresholds for actual reporting to the agency under the reporting rule, but because of the nature of the incident, because of the kind of injury that was done, because of the kind of damage that was done, we would launch an investigation and come up with recommendations, as you heard here today, in order to keep something like that from happening again that could potentially be more severe, where there might be a fatality, might be additional serious injuries, or there might be significant property damage that would be reportable to us. So those are all the things that go into our thought process when we're looking at incidents and trying to make a decision about whether we're going to deploy or not to them, especially in light of the very limited resources and the very small size of this agency as well. So with that as a backdrop, I'll stop talking. We'll open the floor up for public comments. As we said at the outset of this meeting, if you have an actual question, please submit that to us at the public at csb.gov email address that was mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, and we'll work to get back to you as quickly as we can. So with that, Steve, I'll turn it, Steve Hamrick, back to you to recognize anyone who has raised their hand to speak. And also, if people recognize that they can please identify themselves and identify the organization, if any, that they are with. So.
Absolutely. Thanks for handing it over. And just again, reiterating, we're looking for comments here. If you don't feel comfortable, reading your comments to everybody, please feel free to email them to public@csb.gov. And please identify yourself and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Mr. Johnson, Jeff Johnson, please feel free to unmute and ask or make your comment.
I've got to find the unmute. Can you hear me? Maybe
Yes, sir.
You can. I accidentally unmuted. Hallelujah. On incident reporting, can you? How do you? These are incidents that occur that you're not investigating. I believe that's correct. I just want to make sure. And how do you know that you have them all that qualify for to be listed? Can you help me with that?
Well, I'll take it as a comment, Jeff, and we appreciate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Your presentation is already rather than a question, but I'll weave it into my explanation because that's something I didn't. So thank you again. Thank you for you've been on a lot of these calls, and so we always appreciate your participation as with everybody else. Just and Steve Class can correct me if I get this wrong, but Just to clarify, we do investigate some of those incidents that were included on that graph. That's one of the predominant ways that we make a decision to launch a deployment is something that's actually reported to us under the reporting rule. But as your comment implies, we cannot possibly investigate all of those incidents with the limited resources, the limited size of this agency. And so what we have been doing over the last couple of years, starting early in 2025, January 2025, in fact, we have been producing volumes of what we call incident reports. Many of those, we conduct a more limited investigation on of those incidents that are reported to us, communicating with the companies. Sometimes we actually go out to the scene. We just don't launch full-blown investigations that can take months to complete. But we will do that in terms of communication. We'll take the information that's been presented to us. We'll follow up on it. And I will say, and Steve, again, can correct me if I'm wrong, almost, if not all, of the incidents we get additional information on. It's sort of a practice that when we get a notification, our staff that work on the reporting rule will reach back out to the entity that has submitted their report to us, the notification to us, and ask for additional information. Because one of the things that we find is that in the early stages of an incident in particular, people may not really know the full scope or clearly don't know exactly what happened. And there can be additional things that start transpiring and information that we need to know to make a decision about whether we're going to deploy, or when we get into it, when we're writing up the incident reports. And so the shorter ones that I mentioned. And so we've put out 4 volumes of those, Jeff. I believe it's 94 incidents that have been included in those 4 volumes are posted on our website. And as I said, they're relatively succinct summaries of those incidents, some of which are very significant. They're all significant in terms of our perspective, but some of which include fatalities and significant property damage above and beyond just the minimum threshold for reporting to the agency. But your point is also well taken, that the rule doesn't capture everything that's going on out there. As I was indicating, I probably wasn't as clear as I needed to be, but there can be incidents, and there are. We get several reports a week of incidents that meet our thresholds, but there are things that are happening out there on virtually a weekly basis that aren't reported to us. You can read about them in the newspaper, you can hear about them. And where there has been a release of some kind that's occurred, but again, it didn't, no one unfortunately was killed in it. People may have been injured, but they weren't actually admitted to the hospital. Facility or home or business may have been damaged, but not to the $1 million level. So it's a trade-off that was made in the rule in terms of capturing the most serious incidents, so that the CSB could have adequate information to make deployment decisions, but also to look for patterns that might be out there in terms of what's really causing the most serious incidents in the country. And as I indicated, to help prevent them from happening again.
Well, thank you. I have another question, but I won't ask it because it's really not a question. It's not a comment, it's a question.
Okay, well, send it to us and we'll get back to you. Thank you, Jeff. So.
Thank you.
Director Kleist, was there anything you wanted to add to that as far as a response?
The chairman did his usual exceptional job of explaining the essential elements of that, but we do make contact with all owner operators that do submit a report and follow up with them for additional information as necessary. But as the chairperson mentioned, if there is an incident that does not meet that threshold of reporting, they would not be reporting it to the CSB. So there are a number of incidents that take place daily that just don't rise to the level of meeting that threshold of reporting.
Perfect. Hey, is there anybody else out there? Please raise your hand if you'd like to make a short comment. Olivia, I see that you have your hand raised. Please feel free to unmute.
Yep. Hi, Olivia Flinjack. I do process safety consulting, but I just wanted to shout out whoever does your CSB videos. They're wonderful to use for training. Specifically, very happy to see how great the one for Didion turned out. I work with sites that have a lot of combustible dusts, so being able to have a good visual tool to explain or help drive home why it's so important to care about combustible dust when it doesn't fall technically under PSM at all has been helpful. So I just wanted to, whoever's working on those, amazing job, and please keep it up. I look forward to them in a grim way, I guess, whenever they do come out. So I do appreciate that. That's always been extremely helpful wherever I've worked, and using that as a learning tool to use in industry.
Well, Olivia, thank you for your comment. I will take this opportunity to do sort of a promotion for our videos. We get similar comments not only during other meetings like this that we've had, but whenever we were attending public functions, the ones that Sylvia Johnson had mentioned earlier that we've gone to recently. We found that inevitably, no matter where we are, no matter who we're talking to, they bring up the CSB videos. Shauna Longhorn, who's on our staff, works very closely with Hillary Cohen to produce those videos, but there's a lot of work that goes into them, including the investigators who appear in the videos to help make sure that the information provided is relevant and impactful and serve the intended purpose of helping educate folks in the industry, but also the general public and people such as yourself who are advising them, or in other capacities, including students, as we've found that a lot of the videos are being used in the classroom to train chemical engineers, process safety engineers, a lot of folks who may go to work in the industry, or who may become consultants, or who may wind up being an investigator on the CSB staff. So if anyone is watching and you have not yet either seen a CSB video or you've not become a subscriber to our videos, you can certainly can find them on the CSB webpage, but that'll send you to a link to the CSB's YouTube site. And there's a place on the YouTube page where you can sign up and get notices about the videos, the new ones when they're produced. But to date, the agency and the years that the YouTube site's been up there, I believe it's 103 videos that have been produced. The last numbers that I looked at, which is admittedly probably not completely up to date, that we had 73 million views all told on those videos since it was first started. It may well be higher than that now. And we had, at the last time I looked, roughly 417,000 subscribers to our videos, and it probably is higher than that now. So if you're not a subscriber, please, please, please sign up. Want to keep you in the loop on what we're doing here and the great work that our investigative team and everybody else at the CSB is doing. So thank you.
You could, just to remind everybody, it's USCSB on YouTube, and as they always say, like and subscribe so that you can get informed with any of those new videos. I have one more hand raised. Najmeen, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to ask your question or make your comment.
Hi, I'm Naj Meshkati. I want to comment CSB for excellent work that you have done in last many years. I'm a consumer of your reports and your video. I participated in the Texas City investigation with Mr. Don Holmstrom, Bill Hood, and Cheryl McKenzie. And the video is excellent. I'm a professor of engineering at USC. I have been using your reports. I called your accident investigation of Texas BP explosion as a quintessential accident investigation. And I just want to, after commending you for all the good work, despite and in spite all the difficulties, ask Chair Owens, do you intend to update or repeat the Baker panel study, which came after the CSB investigation of BP Texas City? Baker panel specifically looked at the safety culture of BP refining in Northern America. And then there have been two major events that I was involved in. One of them, as a FAA expert panel member on Boeing, we look at the safety culture of Boeing, and we reported to the Senate. I testified before U.S. Senate on 2 years ago about that. The issue of safety culture is becoming more and more important. In fact, in one of the presentations that your colleagues made today, they talk about the issue of corporate governance, and they said commitment to managing process safety. That sounds like safety culture, smells like safety culture, looks like safety culture. I would like to ask you, what is your intention and goal to address the issues of safety culture, both at all these fatalities that you had? You said 36 fatality in your 9 ongoing investigation. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, Naj, and we very familiar with your work out there. We certainly saw your commentary on the incident at the Nippon Dynawave facility when it was published, and we know you've been doing terrific work and have been a long time colleague and promoter of the CSB. I'll put it that way, and so. Again, I'll treat it more as a comment, but I think it raised some important points here. For those who aren't aware, as you indicated, the Baker panel came out of the BP Texas City incident where there were significant failures on the part of BP. They did a comprehensive review of many BP facilities, made a number of recommendations that changed the way that BP does at least a number of things, I will say. And it was a very, very, very impactful study, and something like that had never really been done before, at least certainly at that level within a company like that. I will say, unfortunately, we've had additional incidents involving BP since the BP Texas City and since the Baker report. We actually referenced that report in the investigation report that we did on our investigation into the BP, what we would call the BP Toledo incident, a refinery where there was a fire and 2 workers were killed, both of whom sadly were brothers working at the facility and both killed in the same incident, which we did raise the safety culture issue a little bit in a different way from the way it was raised in there, but we also discussed the Baker report and whether or not some of the lessons from that report in BP Texas City adequately had been learned. So it's always something that is in our minds when we're looking at an incident. We don't go into it assuming there's not a safety culture at a facility when we're doing an investigation, but certainly if it appears to us that there's something overall that caused or contributed to the incident, other than just the very specific aspects of what happened and whichever thing and what individuals did there. If there's something that is in the culture of the operation, whether it's at the particular facility or corporate structure, company-wide, we will make a point of addressing that in the report. So thank you for bringing that up. I know that that's something that has been on a lot of people's minds as they've been seeing some of the incidents that have been taking place. So,
just one more point that to comment CSB, your BP Texas City accident investigation report was cited very prominently in Presidential Commission report on BP Deepwater Horizon report, which was commendable. Again, keep on doing the good job, sir.
Well, thank you. And thank you for joining us today. So good to see you. So.
Good to see you too. Bye.
In the interest of time, I think we'll limit to one or two more comments here. We did have a comment in the chat while we're waiting for anybody else to raise their hand. Thank you for your kind words about the support the Center for Chemical Process Safety has provided on the Optima Bell incident and others. We at the CCPS are committed to support all stakeholders to achieve the world without process safety incidents. We very much value the CSB's contributions on this journey.
It was Shaquille, I think I saw. Wasn't it?
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yes.
So thank you, Shaquille.
All right. Was seeing no one else raise their hands. Chairman Owens,
okay.
If you want to, that's you.
Yes. Before I do my closing comments, I'll turn it back over to Board Member Sylvia Johnson for any final remarks she'd like to make, and then I will take us home. So, Sylvia.
Well, thank you, Steve. And I'd like to echo your and Executive Director Kleist's comments, and to the CSB staff, in particular, those who are not investigators, because as you both said, there is no way to get the work of this agency done without everybody working together. And the staff that support the investigations team and the board are vitally important to what we've been able to accomplish. We've gotten a lot done in the last few months, and also since I've been at this agency, and it has not gone unnoticed that those individuals who are not investigators have played a key role in making sure that the products that we put out are of high quality and high value to our stakeholders and others who read our reports. And lastly, I would say I want to again thank everyone for joining us today, because your very presence here makes the work of this agency even more valuable, because you are the ones who are consuming the reports that we put out and watching the videos that we put out, and hopefully sharing those learnings with your colleagues across a number of industries. And thank you to you all, because you all also help us to be able to not only do great work, but spread the word. So thank you, everyone who attended our meeting today.
Great. Well, thank you, Sylvia. And I'll just echo your comments and to thank everyone again for joining us today. We always appreciate the attendance we get here, and we appreciate the comments, the insightful perspectives that all of you provide to us. It helps us do our job better to hear what's on your minds as well. Just a quick reminder, we hold several of these meetings a year. We try to space them out. Our next public meeting will be on Thursday, September the 17th, also at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. As we get closer to that date, we will put out a notice, not only on our website, but also a press release as well, to remind people that that meeting will be coming up. In the meantime, we hope everyone has a safe day, and we look forward to seeing you again. So thank you, everybody.